Hello, everyone. We're here with Coach Blair Lewis. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How about you?
I can't complain. I can't complain. I'm not gonna change it, nothing anyway. So, just
Right.
get to it. So when did you realize coaching was something you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
Actually, I never had that moment. That was never what I wanted to do. I grew up in Largo, played for my dad, and went to Mount St. Mary's. And my whole deal was I was going to law school. I was going to finish at University of Virginia, go to law school, and become a prosecuting attorney. And then we always say, we make plans and God laughs. And so when I finished at the Mount, I went overseas and played professionally for a while. And then when I came back, I said, you know what? Let me try out for the WNBA at the time. The Mystics had a team, so I had to try out. So went to try out, didn't make that cut, and my coach at the Mount said, "Why don't you come back and coach with me?" And that was the first time. I'm 20, what, 122, that I'm thinking, no, never thought about that. That's not, in my assignment. I'm getting ready to go to law school, or maybe I'll go back overseas. And he said, Vanessa, just give it one shot. Just come work with me. You can work out and then you can try out next year with the team. And I was nursing a little bit of a knee injury. So I said, well, it's not a bad trade-off. I can use the facilities. I can still practice with the girls. Okay. Now, like I said, I played for my dad at Largo, so he coached for years. But I remember all of those telephone calls from parents and players about playing time, and I said, oh, I don't even know why you want to do this, Dad. So then, I got into my first year with Coach Sheehan at the Mountain. I said, wow, this is pretty easy. It's usually pretty easy when you're not sitting in that first seat. So I enjoyed the first year. Went back, tried out for the Mystics, made it to the last cut, didn't make the team, was all good. I was set to go to law school. I said, let me just go ahead. And Coach Sheehan said, one more year. And I was like, oh, and the girls at that point, there was a connection. They were like, Vanessa, come back, because they were still, a lot of them, my teammates. So I said, okay, let me try this again. As we were going into that second year, my coach came into the office and said, hey, Vanessa, I need to talk to you. So I said, okay, let's go. And he's like, I'm going to retire. And I was like, and he had been there, 20 some maybe years. And I said, oh, well, let's make this the best year. Maybe that's why he wanted me to come back to, his last hurrah. And he said, oh, no, it's going to be on Friday. This was like Wednesday. I was like, wait, this. He's like, yeah, and your press conference will be on Friday. We'll be naming you my successor. So when you say, did I ever think about coaching? That moment right there, I don't know, I was 24 years old. And I called my dad, the first person, said, Dad, they want me to succeed Coach Sheehan and be a head coach. Like, I've only done this 2 years. Like, I don't know if I want to do this. He's like, oh, yeah, you taking the job. So I took the job, and here I am 20 some years later. So when you say, was this always a dream or passion of mine? No, I feel like somehow I just kind of got dumped into it, and I ended up being pretty good at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's meant to be is what's meant to be. We're gonna backtrack a little bit. You're a Maryland native, like you said.
PG County, baby.
Yeah, yeah. Lots and lots and lots of talent in Maryland, for sure. Um, if you were to use one word to describe a Maryland basketball player, what would it be and why?
Tough.
Tough, tough.
They go through that gauntlet. Most of the Maryland basketball players, they were playing against some of the toughest competition in each other. And then you get into AAU and you go travel and you play against obviously the toughest competition in other places. However, there's nothing like hoops in the DMV for girls and for guys. I mean, you just go through that gauntlet. Like, I know when I get a PG County or a DMV kid that they are going to be absolutely tough.
Um, if you were to use one word to describe your coaching style, what would it be and why?
Tough. I would say that I'm tough, but I coach with love. And I think that that's always been the balance that I saw as a player. Like I said, I played for my dad. So not only did we share the court, we shared the car ride home. And sometimes that car ride home was, I had to take the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it was coming from a place of love because it was coming from my dad. And then when I went to the Mount, I played for Coach Bill Sheehan, and he's a father of four, and I felt the same way that, he coached us tough, but there was always that element of love behind the coaching. And so, you can't have, discipline without love and vice versa. And so, on one hand, yes, I coach our players to become the best that they don't even know yet. And so sometimes when you're dealing with young people, like there's that kind of cat tug until they realize, wow, let me just see what else I can become, because we see the potential. And so you're coaching that potential out of a young person. And then sometimes when they get it, then it's like the tug of war stops and it's like, okay, I trust where you're coming from. But up until that point, they want to know that outside of these lines that you love and you care for them. And so that's what my program is built on, the love and the discipline.
Like you say, you played at Mount, very good career there. Haven't played at that level. You jumped into the assistant coaching level fairly quickly. You had, I think, a very unique lens. A lot of people don't jump right to the bench like that. So having been a former player so quickly now coaching, can you tell me one, pro and con to it, and looking back at it to now, what's one pro or positive as a player back then to now? You're like, I just don't get these kids. They don't do this, in comparison to when I played. So.
You're talking about from a young player, like
Yeah.
what? Okay. I think as a young player, for me, I had a great relationship with my head coach from the beginning in college because I was coached by my dad. So I was always around a coach. I come from a line of basketball talent, especially from the DMV. Adrian Branch that played at Maryland, Ted Jeffries that played at UVA. All of my sisters played East Tennessee State. So I came from a lineage of basketball. So we were always talking hoops. So when I got to the Mount as a freshman, there was nothing that was awkward or nervous for me, or taking harsh criticism didn't bother me as a freshman because I took it all the time at home, from a parent or a cousin or a sister. So I think for me now, like you're saying, just to relate it to where we are now, I think that there's an element of the love that's left out of trying to propel and push a young person to be all they can be. And I think you hear in the media all the time, like this challenge of, mental abuse and the coaches and the players. You didn't hear that language back in our day. Like your parents released you to the coach and you were they were your responsibility. And, whatever the coach said went. Well, now you can see in the times we're in now, even like just the parents to the referees, like the poor coach that got killed a couple of weeks ago, just coaching his football team. Like there's that angst right there where there is not the trust that I think, hey, I'm going to release you to the coach and they know what they're doing. And don't get me wrong, those circumstances are real for young people. But I just don't think we had that in our time. Like you were released to the coach, you listened, you did what you were supposed to do. As long as they didn't tell you to do anything illegal or immoral, go for it. But now there has to be a cushion with our young people. Like they go through a lot off the court. And maybe I would say we did as well, but that just never was the outlet we had to say, hey, I'm going through something, because the sport was the escape for us at times. And I'll just say that for me, but other people, maybe it wasn't an escape, but maybe there wasn't a fertile ground to share that. And now we're in this place now where these athletes need that cushion, and they need it from the coaches as well. Like we can coach hard, but I also believe you got to coach with love, and you got to coach with that cushion that our young people are going through things that either we didn't go through or we didn't feel comfortable sharing in the space that we were in, but it's here now. And we have to change to that, especially older coaches, that have been in the game for a while. Like we only knew one way to coach, but now that's changing because our young people need sports, not just for an escape, but they also need to have fertile ground to know that they're cared about while they're enjoying a sport.
You had a, very successful career at Mount. I play at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is in the same conference as Mount.
I see that shirt you have on, and I don't like it so much, but we're not in the same conference anymore. So you,
I think last year we won the regular season. I think we had you guys just by a little bit last year.
not the women.
Yeah, the women, but y'all got us in the tournament. So
Okay, that's all I remember. Going to the big dance. But we had some battles with FDU back in my day. Oh my goodness, I love playing against you guys.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember going to Mount my first year. I saw the banner, jersey retired, stuff like that, did some research. And I was like, when I started doing my podcast, I gotta get Coach on the show. And then I realized you're in the Hall of Fame. In the NEC. What does that mean to you? How special is that conference?
Um, they gave me my first start. I'm forever indebted to the Northeast Conference and everything that our commissioners and our coaches banded together to grow the Northeast Conference when I was a player there. It means so much. I was, I look back on that time and I was just surrounded by so much talent that at the time as an athlete, you're doing what you're doing because you want to help your team. And for me, there were never a lot of personal accolades that I chased. So I look back now and I'm like, wow, like I got chosen for that and for that. Like I just wanted to help my team, and along the way, not only are you helping your team, but then you're getting that, that recognition, and it means a whole lot. Like the Northeast Conference, I loved playing in the conference. I love the competition. I love the coaches. I loved how I felt playing in that conference. I loved how I watched it grow when I left the conference, and even to the point it is now. Like it will forever be a really, really great place in my heart.
Awesome, awesome. As a coach, what are your non-negotiables?
With the players.
With the players and your staff, it could be either,
I always say that there are never any excuses that are worth listening to. Now there are reasons, but excuses are totally different of why we can't be successful. So I don't take that from my staff. I don't take it from my players. I rarely take no for an answer. I just feel like no is just there's another way that we can get it done. And obviously you're talking about within the lines and with the rules, but excuses are a different thing. And I think that when you've been given a purpose, when you've been given a God-given gift, that you should explore that to its fullest. And so for me, my non-negotiable is there's never ever an instance where I'll take no. There are no excuses for not being great. You can still lose and be great. There are games that I didn't win every game. But like you just said, I was in the Hall of Fame. My teams were good because consistency over the long time was what won out, not excuses.
Today's young player, having worked at Slam magazine before I got into coaching, they don't, in coaching AAU, I coach EYBL for Exodus. When I talk,
I never got one of your players. Okay.
Coach, you're killing me, Coach. You're killing me. Talk
That's
to
okay.
Thomas about that. Talk to Thomas.
Okay, all right. Tell Thomas to put a little nugget in there for us.
You got it, Coach. You got it. I know, having coached AAU and dealing with a lot of high-level players, I will always have a conversation with them in regards to, like, who's your favorite player? Who do you watch? Like, did you watch the Memphis game last night? Did you watch Atlanta Dream? Like, I will always ask those questions. And I realized that a lot of young female basketball players don't watch the game. Like, if you lined up maybe 15 of them, maybe 5 at best, like, consistently watch the game. Why do you think that is the case? And how do we modify it? I know that the league is still, quote unquote, for lack of better terms, in its infant stage. And I've seen so much growth in the past, 5 to 10 years. But how do we really turn the corner? Are we responsible for this as coaches in regards to, like, pushing this more on our kids to support the game that we're a part of?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. I do know that the summertime is a tough time, especially for families and for players. Like you just said, you coached EYBL, and we're in the gyms from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and not to say actually 10 p.m. at times, but it's never an excuse, for that. But I just think in the summer where you're so active and you're outside and if you're a player and you're playing, AAU basketball, you're always traveling, whatever, those kind of times. I mean, I find time to watch it. Um, I don't know why there is not more viewership from our young people. Like you said, we're still in the infancy stages, but there are some players that are retiring that have, they've just carried the banner for us, Tarasi and Sue Bird, like that our kids should know about, like Candace Parker, like Lisa Leslie, even before that, like they initiated this charge. And I also think that for our young people, like we need to start seeing that there is a consistency as far as playing in the WNBA, and our very players have to leave that and then go overseas just to make money. Like that's tough for a young person, because if a guy makes the NBA, they always say, oh, he's set, his family's set for life, or at least set for a while, however he manages his money. So it's almost just like, when is that carrot or that caveat going to be here for the women to say, hey, this can be my only job as well? And I talk to my players about that a lot too. The ones say, they would say, oh, I want to go to the W. Well, they're not going to draft a whole lot of players, and your better money is overseas. That's tough after 25 years to still swallow that pill that our players aren't getting, that type of compensation for the job that they do.
So like you had mentioned, you got the Mount job, you've had a couple job interviews since then. Looking back, I always ask this question because it's important to me. What is one of the hardest questions you had to answer during the interview? Or like, for example, you could say, Christian, you better be able to answer this question. Like, you got to be able to answer this one. When I'm hiring an assistant coach, I always ask this question, so either a unique question or like the hardest question I need to be able to answer.
On an interview.
On an interview. So you're interviewing me. What do I need to be able to answer?
Your why for coaching.
Why?
For me, why? Why do you do this, Christian? Why do you do this? What about this excites you? What about this once you want to help me grow and be a successful, continue to be a successful head coach? Like I think young assistant coaches sometimes fail to realize that what you do helps the head coach continue to be successful. I think they think, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to be successful, and then I'm going to go and get all these other jobs. But, what buys you into wanting to help where your feet are planted become successful for the long haul, the whole program, not just the head coach, but the program. So I would ask, what is your why? Like, why do you do this? Why do you want to do this? And my second one would be, what are your goals? Because if your only goal was to become an assistant coach at George Mason or Mount St. Mary's or FDU, okay. But if that was your only goal, then you've already reached it. And people that don't have dreams die. So what is your next one?
Yeah. You've been at, a couple different schools. You've done a great job there, building, the success and the culture and things like that. The first year is always difficult from what I know. In lots of cases, you get hired late, you can't really pick all your players, but yeah, you're also trying to establish the culture in regards to, the team, and then you're trying to show them your way of how you want them to play. Tell me, any of the schools you've been at as a head coach, how was the adjustment period, and maybe a thing from the mental or physical side in regards to that adjustment that you're like, we had to get this, or this is something that we do in year one. This is our thing, wins or losses, this is what we do?
Well, I think I can go down all three schools. At the Mount, I was taking over, or I was coming behind one of the most successful coaches in NEC history, Bill Sheehan. And so, as a player of his, that's different. I was a dominant player for him, but now I was stepping in the role to succeed him, and the expectations. And I'm 24 years old. Were way up here, and that was I was so nervous because I knew how to play, but there was no playbook for coaching, like there's just not that. You get tidbits from here, there, and everywhere, and you kind of start to build your brand and what you want. So I think for me, the first job was for me the most scariest. I was like, I did not want to let the Mount down. I did not want to come behind Coach Sheehan and everything that he built like fall. And as a player, your confidence is in the way you perform. And as a coach, I didn't have the confidence yet into how I coached. All I was coming from was a background of player confidence. So my confidence was so um, just meshed into my performance as a coach that it was hard to separate the two in my first year. Because if we lost, I felt like I lost as a player. It's so different when you coach. Like, yeah, you lose it, but it's not the same. I mean, I would be down like a player, and I'm like, okay, I can't be this way anyway. So the biggest transition was going from player to coach. And I think the two programs I took over after that to rebuild, Bethune-Cookman and George Mason, it was definitely the culture, because both of them had did not win a lot of games, and they were on a downward slide. And so those players didn't know winning. They were only used to, oh, we're going to lose again. And then I was coming in from a coach that I didn't know a lot of losing. So the culture of getting them to say, what's that non-negotiable when I take over the program is, we're going to learn, and what we have in our program is called an Ubuntu spirit. You've probably seen that on, a lot of different team stuff, but we adopted this years ago. And the spirit is, we are because I am, like we do this together. And so to get the selfishness out of programs, to start building the culture, you got to have teams that want to buy in for each other and with each other. And so in year one at both places, that's what we had to start doing. My non-negotiable is like, we have to start to understand we're doing this thing together. And getting players that wanted to do that. Like, you recruit players and say, oh, am I going to, play 40 minutes? Well, that's not the question to ask me. Are you going to be willing to play with your teammates for whatever minutes you get? Or are you still going to be a great teammate if you don't play any minutes? Like, I'm not going to determine your playing time. You are. But in the process of trying to get that playing time, who are you going to be for this team?
Yeah. Yeah. So Bethune-Cookman, I went to HBCU myself at Lincoln.
Okay.
So I know I'm a pro HBCU type of guy.
Yes.
So you don't really need to sell me in regards to why it made sense. I will say this: you're at Bethune-Cookman, year 2, year 3. You sit down with a player. Parents are there. What's the easiest selling point, and what's the hardest part that you're trying to avoid having to answer? Hardest question
At Bethune?
at Bethune.
At Bethune.
So what's the
Um,
easy thing?
the easiest thing is, and I'll tell you, coming from a PWI to an HBCU, the experience in my first year as a coach was eye-opening. Like, just getting an opportunity to be around and be influenced by people that look like me. I hadn't had that in all of my years. See, playing overseas, so to land on a campus where we were encouraged and it was okay to be who we are and how we look and our curly hair. And I was like, wow, like, and our players walk with a confidence about them, and a student body. And I would go listen to lectures of all of the greats that would stop through campus, just like, Lincoln, like we get a lot of great people that stop through campus to drop a nugget. And I was able to be in those rooms that it was awe-inspiring to be okay being different. That wasn't always my experience, being okay with being different. you're okay being in those rooms because you're polished enough to handle yourself. But being okay with being different and not being judged for it, like that was a different space for me. So to sell a young person of color that to come to Bethune-Cookman to grow, to be on sacred ground and hallowed ground with a woman, Mary McLeod Bethune, who in her time founded a college when at the time she founded the college, segregation was very real. We weren't expected to be educated, and she found a way. So the big no excuses for me is deeply rooted in her strength to found a university at a time where it wasn't popular for us to be educated. So to be around that wisdom on a daily basis was huge. And to watch our young people grow and be confident in who they are, to go out and be able to say, hey, you know what? You can occupy the second highest seat in the land now. Oh, I'm sorry. We've already done that. Why don't you go ahead and occupy the highest seat in the land? To watch that and to see Obama become president, and Kamala become vice president, and our young people to live in a time where they're able to witness that, well, you already know. You already know. Like I know. I mean, I'm going so that my experience there shaped a lot of me. And I was, I wasn't 24 anymore. At that time I was 30, and it was like, wow, this is how the other half lives, because I didn't have that experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the second part that made it hard were the resources. And I think you can kind of go around with almost every HBCU, and Deion Sanders is trying to say, change that narrative down at Jackson State for us. But, the resources were not and are not on par with, our counterparts at PWIs. And it makes it tough to get that next level player to want to commit there and not have the same resources that they go on another visit, and it looks very different.
We could talk about that all day, Coach. That last part right there, we could talk about that all day. You stayed at two different schools for a very long time. You're an assistant, you're a head coach, you had long tenures in regards to your time at those schools. But today's young coach, they bounce around a lot. That's the thing. You're here for a year, you're here for 2 years, and you're here for 3 years. A lot of young coaches are like that. What advice would you give them? Because there's pros and cons to both sides of it, but you've experienced the longevity and being stable and things like that, and how that really helped you in your career. So what advice would you give us in regards to that? And why should we plan ourselves in a certain place?
I
Or
think
maybe you think we shouldn't.
right. I think everybody's experience is different. And that's why when you asked on the interview, what question would I ask you first is, why are you doing this? Like, what are your goals? And if your goal is to be, a head coach one day, or to be the best recruiting coordinator out there, or, I just want to stay, I'm close to home, and I love this area, and I've always loved this school, and I want to stay here for the long, whatever your goals are going to kind of determine or help you navigate your path. But my story is one of loyalty. I stayed loyal every place that I was. And I say loyal to the point of what I said I was going to do, I stayed until I did it. And I don't know how much I would have learned by taking a job as an assistant coach and maybe just being there 1 year. Now also understand, young people don't control, assistant coaches control a lot of times. So if that head coach gets fired, then they got to bounce, right? Sometimes it's not in their hands. But I think when I came up, I would see a lot of the assistant coaches jump for the money. And that just is not always the satisfaction. So what are your goals? Are your goals to help produce the next player of the year in your conference? Then skill development and all those things are going to be important as you put things in your bag. And you want to get with someone who, as a head coach, who pushes that. Like you have to find out what you want and then go around people who are doing that. So if you want to be a skill development coach or the best recruiting coordinator, well, you got to find those type of programs that's going to help you do that. And all head coaches are different. Like some are big on recruiting, some are big on skill development, some are big on. So find out what that works with you. But I just think that you got to plant yourself um, until those goals of yours get reached. And sometimes it's hard to when you're bouncing around, but coaching is a different business. You can make your way different than my way. My way is not always cut out. Like for me to be a coach that's never ever been asked to leave in 20 years, wherever I've been, like that's doesn't happen a lot. But my story is different than other people. So I think you got to find your niche. You got to find out what you want and why you're doing this first, and then find those places and those people that you want to be attached to help you achieve that.
Mm. Um, it's easy to talk about the good. That's always easy. Let's talk about the bad.
Okay.
Um, Tell me about a rough patch, a low point in your career. And I think we all have those moments, whether it be the conflict with family time and balance, we talked about that. And, maybe, dealing with coworkers can be hard sometimes, administration, you know, tell me a moment or a thing that really got to you and it puts you in a fork in the road type of moment. Like, maybe this place isn't right for me, or maybe this job isn't right for me, and how you handled that moment.
Um, this is gonna sound strange, but that moment was probably 2 years ago when COVID shut us down. And it wasn't the fact that COVID shut us down, the missing basketball or, not being able to coach as it was the issues of social justice started to come out. And because of COVID, we couldn't be connected as we wanted to. A lot of it was Zoom calls and those kind of things. And watching our young people struggle with things that we thought were in our country's past that literally were not in the past. They were still here looming. And we all got a chance to sit in front of the television and watch it play out. And it had been playing out, but we hadn't been still enough, a lot of us, to watch it, or we hadn't videoed it long enough so that the world could see. And watching our young people go through emotions that when I never went through, but I had my parents nearby to know that those were the emotions that they were, and they're in their 80s now. So they were the grandchildren of slaves that witnessed lynchings and things like that. And I'm listening to my parents talk, and I'm listening to the kids I'm coaching talk. And it was one of the toughest moments to being as a coach where I could not change it for them. That we had to navigate this new that was new for a lot of people to sit there and witness. How do we navigate this during COVID, during the time where I couldn't sit them down and comfort them and tell them everything was going to be all right, because it wasn't. And it felt like it was getting worse. And our kids were going through stuff mentally, and they wanted to go out and fight, and they wanted to picket, and we were trying to find the best ways for them to have a voice at this time. And I just felt like basketball was the least of my worries for the first time in my life. Like, how do we how do we change this for them? And that was the space I was in. And there were a lot of moments where I'm like, is coaching what I want to do now? How can I help these young people? How can I help the world? How can we help each other change? And I think it stirred up things in me that I never even had there, but I knew my young kids, my players wanted coach to have the answers, because we usually do, right? And we didn't. Um, and not to be able to tell them. And I remember at the time, I think he was 4, my son came in the room, and the George Floyd um, situation had just happened. And it was all any news station could talk about, right? And so my son, we're in COVID, so we're all in the house. And one night he came in and he had tears in his eyes, and we had just gotten off a Zoom call with the players. So I don't know how much he may have heard of that. And the girls were pouring out their spirit. They were sharing, they were hurting. And I went back in the room and I was just sitting there on the bed and I was just in tears, like, wow, as much impact as I've had as a coach, I can't do anything to impact this game right now. I felt so helpless. And my son said, Mom, and I said, yeah. He said, am I Black? Is something wrong with me? And I didn't at the time sit down and say, hey, son, you're Black. I don't know if I ever would have said that. Like I at 4, like we didn't have that conversation, but this society was speeding up that process. And I was like, oh my gosh, why are you saying that? He said, I just hear on the news, like if you're Black, you're gonna die. And I felt like, you know what? Have I been so immersed in my career that my son, one, doesn't know he's Black? Does he think he's going to die now? Like all of this was hitting my players, but my family. And that was a tough moment for me and my household, trying to navigate a space where you couldn't even be connected the way you used to be, to put your arms around these young people. But to kind of find a way, like, how do we as a Christian household navigate these times together? And when I just started like having conversations with white and Black and young and old, and pulling people on Zoom calls to talk to our players, like to get their feelings out, to go out and walk and march and be a part of the front line. And it's still not okay, right? It's not okay. And that part is, that pulls my heartstrings, that we have a platform and we have a voice to speak to change. And we as coaches have to do it. We have to do it.
Mhm.
So sorry, I know I got.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I asked the question, you gave a great answer. We talked about your time at a HBCU, and only a couple more questions, Coach.
Okay.
We know the gaps. We know the lack of resources sometimes, things like that. And there are a lot of kids, for lack of better terms, that we think would be fantastic to play at, that level, that simply put, we may not have the resources initially to get our hands on a kid like that, you know. So they may choose another team and barely play, where they will come to your school and really develop and grow. So that's a big issue. Now fast forward, we have the transfer portal, and kids don't have to sit a year. Now they're able to jump right into the streamline of things. You saw the Jackson State coach. She was talking about the portal and how it's been such a key element and tool at her level now to help close the gap in regards to getting her teams better faster. Instead of it taking 3-4 years, coach is like, hey, we're able to jump and streamline it, 2 years, and all we got to do is get the product right. Tell me your thoughts about the portal, because there's so many pros, so many cons. It's tough from a coaching perspective, because these kids could be, what have you done for me lately, and be out the door. But on the other side of it, it gives certain programs a legitimate chance to, really close that gap and give those kids a chance, opportunity to play or get away from a coach that is toxic. So what are your thoughts?
I think you hit on all of them. I think that there are a ton of pros and cons to it. Yes, you can, we call it the new draft board. So you kind of sit at those games at AAU and you're like, okay, go ahead and go there. We'll see you on the draft board in about a year or two, because we know the players who are, gone over their head and like you said, could come in and make an impact for you, but want to go there because, maybe the name looks better on paper. But I think it does. I think, when I came through, you signed a 4-year deal, and you were locked in, and there's something to be said about that. I was a 4-year player, and it's almost like now you wear that with a badge of honor. Like, you went somewhere for 4 years. Like, that was the expectation then, that whatever went on, you gutted it out, you stayed with it. So there's something to be said about the young people, that you want them to understand that part, because it's going to take them into their life. Like, you can't always just jump ship when things aren't the way you want them. But then there are the legitimate concerns. There may be a parent that is sick, that getting closer to home, brings that player a lot more relief. And, or you said a toxic environment, or maybe this wasn't what I thought it was, and I'd rather go play, even if I go play D2, like at first, nobody wants to go D2. Why? But it's a scholarship, like, right? Like, we put that on, gotta go D1. So there are all kinds of reasons why these young people have um, the ability to go in the portal, or for a coach's standpoint, hey, this may not be a good home for you. Let me help you find another home that may fit you better. Um, I always say this. When I dated my husband, I dated him 5 years. Actually, I knew him 5 years before I went on my first date with him. And for 5 years, Eric Lewis asked me out for ice cream every time he saw me. Hey, coach, you want to go get some ice cream? He went to Bethune, so he's always up there on campus. Whenever he would come off a game, he works for the NBA, so he would be in town. I'm like, oh, he doesn't have a game tonight. He'd be on there, and it wasn't in a pushy way. It was respectful. Hey, coach, you want to go get some ice cream? And obviously, I knew what that meant. That was, you wanted to date, and I wasn't ready for that. But he would ask. But during those 5 years, we got a chance to get to know each other. Like, we still would have conversations. They surround around basketball, that kind of thing. And then year 5 came, and I said, let's go get some ice cream. I say that to say I had a long time getting to know him before I dated him and then got married to him. This recruiting process, we're talking about these kids that are, when you probably see them on the scene, are 14, 15. You don't get a chance to get that type of intimacy with them. Like, the NCAA rules don't allow for you to go over their house every day, or, so you don't get a chance to go get ice cream with them, right? You just have to play the parts that is allowed. You can call this time, or you can call that time, or you can go see them at this time. So sometimes when they get to you, you haven't had enough ice cream to find out either way, is this a good match? So it's not a bad thing. Sometimes you just haven't had enough time to date them, right? To get to know them, or them to get to know you. And it's tough to do that over a phone call. Like, I would have never married my husband over a phone call, right? But we're expecting them to stay married to us for 4 years. And it's tough to build that relationship. And the ones that get it right, yeah, you get a player and a coach that are happy for the next 4 years. And it's a great thing. But then there are times where, you maybe just didn't have enough ice cream. And for both sides, it benefits you to maybe find someone else that you can go get some ice cream with.
I see George Mason play. You guys are playing Davidson. You finished the game versus Davidson. Guys walked away with the win. I walked back to my car.
Oh, you were at the game?
No, I'm giving you the example, coach.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yes, I've seen you play a good amount of times. I'm putting my keys into the car. And I'm thinking, George Mason. George Mason is this. What do you want me to think? George Mason is blank. When I walked away from that game, this is how you want me to feel.
As a recruit.
As a observer of the game, like watching the game, this is the feeling you want me to have, having seen your team play. George Mason is tough.
Yeah. Oh, definitely tough. that coach is tough. That team is tough. That coach is walking in 4-inch heels. She gotta be tough. No, but you know what? I want you to feel like you want to come back again every time we play, because you felt watching that game in its pure sense that we played the game well, that it was a great environment to be in, that we, when you welcome someone to a game, you're welcoming them to your home. What was that experience like from the time you checked your ticket, took your seat, watched, 40 minutes of basketball, went to the restroom, came back out, left, got in your car, and you said, man, when do they play next? I want to be a season ticket holder. I want to be everywhere they are. And I want, you know what I want more than important? I want my kids to come with. Because I want, if I have a young daughter, to see herself as those strong, bright, amazing women that that young daughter of yours can look up to and say, I want to be like that. You know what? The next time I come to George Mason, I'm bringing my whole family.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I'm long-winded. Anything I missed you want to share? This is when, you can share anything that I may have missed. You want to talk about, a question you may have for me or whatever you want. Like, this is your time, coach.
No, because I'm long-winded too. I'm a head coach. We'll be on here forever. No, this was great. A very different interview for me. Usually it's, hey, I see who you're playing this year, and talk about your team and who the girls are. Like, we talked about basketball, and it's good times and it's bad times. But it's what has made me. Basketball, I always say this little round ball has taken me literally around the world. It's a globe for me. And it's not just a globe as far as what I've been able to do with basketball by going different places, but it's a globe because it brings people from all places together.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, coach, I thank you so much for making time for this. And I've learned a lot, and I will be a supporter and watch you guys as much as possible.
All right. And you'll come back to every game, right?
I'm gonna try.
Yes.
I'm gonna try and support, and I'm gonna try to beat Mount, even though that's your team. Like, I can't wait to play Mount again. All right, coach.
Okay.
You have a good
Thank
one.
you again. All righty. Bye.